Every morning we take a step outside, we are bombarded by an insane amount of energy. That energy has been fueling our entire world over millennia. As you have may realize, that energy comes from the sun. Yet we rarely use that energy directly to power our grid. As a society, we use more and more energy to fulfill our needs. In 2019, we have used over 25,000 terawatt-hour globally, and that's just for electricity, which is around 15% of our global energy consumption. As we can see on the graph here, most of our electricity was generated using fossil fuels, and the rest are renewables. If we observe the graph again carefully, there's a transition towards renewables, but the share of a solar photovoltaic system seems rather low. Why is that the case? Is it a cause that hinders solar photovoltaic adoption? Well, let's see. Here, let's take a look at the levelized cost of energy graph, or LCOE for short. We can clearly see an exponential reduction of costs in a solar photovoltaic system. If we look at the cost of electrical generation, solar photovoltaic is definitely the cheapest. This is caused by our advancement of our semiconductor technology and a rising demand for solar photovoltaic. It is even cheaper than a coal or a gas power plant. So the transition towards solar photovoltaic is no-brainer, right? If we look at the global solar irradiation map, on the equator we can generate around 3 to 6 kilowatt-hour per meter squared per day. And on the southern and northern hemisphere, we can generate around 1 to 3 kilowatt-hour per meter squared per day. With napkin calculation, assuming we can harvest 2 kilowatt-hour per meter squared per day, we need around 35,000 kilometers squared of land for our entire electrical energy demand in 2020. That's a huge area, but compared to our farmland that takes about 48 million kilometers squared globally, that's only about 0.07%. That's practically nothing. And it doesn't need to be installed on a fertile land. It can be installed on a desert or unproductive land, or even on top of a rooftop within a city. There is one obvious reason why we are not utilizing solar as our main electrical energy generation. It is an intermittent source of energy. When the sun goes down, no more electricity. And that's a huge problem. The way we generate electricity is instantaneous, meaning the power generated by the grid, whether it comes from fossil fuels or renewables, it is matched by the load demand and no storage in between. The grid operator constantly monitors the electrical demand. If the demand rises, the grid operator simply channels more water into the turbine to increase its power. Same is also true for a fossil fuels-based generator. They are all adjustable to match the energy demand. That's what solar photovoltaic systems are lacking. Historically, we've never stored grid-sized energy because the cost of generating energy on demand is always favorable, because we can always burn more fuel or channel more water current into our turbine generator. Solar panels, on the other hand, are at the mercy of nature. We cannot tell the sun to keep irradiating our panel and dial up or down the intensity to match our energy demand. We have to store the excess energy into a battery during the peak solar irradiation and discharge it during the night. To access this problem further, we need to see our daily electrical demand. You can see a slight decrease during the day and peak consumption during the evening. This is no coincidence. People tend to use more electricity during the evening after long work hours. We start to turn on our TV, AC, and light while we are at home. If we use photovoltaic to supply our grid, we generate the most during our normal demand and generate the least when the demand is highest. If we stack these two graphs together, we will see a so-called duck curve. Partial demand was fulfilled during the day, and a sudden surge of demand rose when solar no longer generated electricity. This surge of demand imposed a stress on our electrical grid and forced the grid operator to turn up an alternate source of power to fill up the slack. And the alternate source of power is usually a coal or gas-based power plant. If we want to avoid using such a method, we need to produce an excess amount of electrical energy from our solar panel and store it into a battery. This is where things get tricky. In order to store power generated by our solar photovoltaic system, we need to generate a lot of excess power, more than double to power our demand during the dark. Now let's see the cost of storage. Lithium-ion batteries are one of the best storage for our electricity. We use it daily for powering up our mobile device for days with a high power density. So let's use it for our hypothetical calculation. According to this graph, if we extrapolate it a little bit, the cost of a lithium-ion batteries is around $156 to $1,000 per kilowatt hour. Let's confirm our calculation with the newest generation of Tesla Megapack batteries. It costs about $1.2 million for a 3 megawatt hour battery, or $406 per kilowatt hour. Not so far-fetched, and it gets even cheaper the more we buy. At 100 units for 3000 megawatt hour, we get $280 per kilowatt hour. If we want to compete with a 300 megawatt coal power plant, with 300 megawatt solar photovoltaic output, assuming that we have to store a half of the energy for powering the grid during the night and use the other half during the day, we need around 600 units of Tesla Megapack or 1.8 gigawatt hour of capacity. Now let's compare the costs. To match $112 megawatt hour coal power plant energy generation cost, we need to stretch the cost per kilowatt hour of storage. The cost of solar photovoltaic is around $36 per megawatt hour. So our storage must cost less than $76 per megawatt hour. With the $280 per kilowatt hour, the Megapack battery must operate at minimum 9.8 years just to meet the $76 per megawatt hour threshold. That's about 3,589 days of operation. Within those years, the battery will degrade over time and reduce the available capacity. If we see the lithium battery cycle life, or how much capacity is left after a certain charge and discharge time, we can see a gradual downward trend. For 100% complete discharge, for fulfilling the electrical demand during every night, lithium batteries only stand for 1 to 2,000 cycles or days until they lose 20% of their capacity, which barely match our estimation for beating a coal power plant. To extend the life of lithium storage, we simply must not discharge it completely, but that will increase the cost of storage, since we need more batteries to store some unusable capacity just to extend their life. That's true, even for a Megapack, even though we don't know the exact value. And that's still a problem. If we increase the capacity, we increase the cost per kilowatt hour of storage, which increase the operational time just to match the cost of a coal power plant, not to mention longer return on investment. So the reliance on solar photovoltaic alone, even if it is cheaper, won't let us solve our carbon problem. More research and more mass manufacturing will bring the cost of lithium down even more. But in the meantime, we need more alternative, either in form of energy storage or stabilizing supply and demand for our grid. To phase out fossil fuel and reclaim at least 15% from our global energy generation, we can combine multiple renewables together to create a diverse portfolio, where our electrical energy is generated with solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and even nuclear. That would somehow average the energy generation and use the battery only as a buffer if the generator can keep up with the demand. And also other alternatives for storing energy are being developed and used, but that's topic for another day.